I don't know what I've been told.
I don't know what I've been told.
The ACT's the way to go.
The ACT's the way to go.
So prepare and do your best.
So prepare and do your best.
On the ACT test.
On the ACT test.
Sound off.
1, 2.
Knock it on down.
3, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Today we're doing our next ACT boot camp, and we will be talking about the mathematics portion of the ACT test. As you can see on the screen, the mathematics portion is broken down into several areas. Overall, you're going to have 60 questions in 60 minutes to answer. You would think you'd want 1 minute per question, but you really want to go a little bit faster than that so that you have some time at the end to check over, revise answers, or maybe make some really good guesses at questions you couldn't work out. The areas of the mathematics test are basically pre-algebra, elementary algebra, intermediate algebra, coordinate geometry, plane geometry, and trigonometry. Each one of them has a different percentage and a different number of questions. You can see that pre-algebra is 23% of the test. Today, that's what we're going to focus on mainly. Elementary algebra, 17%. Intermediate algebra, 15%. These two sort of combine the areas of Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. Coordinate geometry and plane geometry, as you can figure out. Coordinate geometry is mainly geometry, but it deals with a little bit of algebra mixed in. The plane geometry, you're going to do a lot of things with lines, perpendicular and parallel lines, triangles, rectangles. There is a small percentage of the test which is trig. It's usually 4 questions, and that's why it's really good to be through Algebra 2 trig when you take this test, because then you'll have all areas covered. Focusing on pre-algebra. The questions here are questions that you might have to flash back to 6th, 7th, 8th grade or your Algebra 1 class. A lot of these are going to be dealing with decimals and fractions. You're going to have a lot of things where you're going to have to do ratio and proportion and percent. You'll have some basic equations, usually just with one variable, an x. Also, we'll get into areas of probability and data collection and representation, and some basic statistics. So today we're going to focus on this pre-algebra part. The pre-algebra first question we're going to look at, it's actually a percent question. So take about 30 seconds and try to work through the problem. Okay, I'm going to work through the problem in a couple of different methods. The first method, I'm going to use these simple percentages and do some subtraction to get my answers. We know with percents, you've got to change it into decimal form if you want to try to figure out this problem. We're going to take the 200 that the workers make, and they're going to get cut by 5%. So we're going to find out what 5% of 200 is. 5% of 200 comes out to be $10. So when they get their pay cut, they're actually losing $10 of pay, so their weekly salary will be $190. Well, they have a change of heart a little bit later, and the workers got a raise of 10% from that weekly salary. So let's find out what 10% of 190 is. Again, we're going to change it into a percentage, a decimal percentage. That's $19. So now we have to go back and we're going to add in the $19. So in the end, their salary changes to $209 per week. Another way of doing this problem, would be to take the $200, and we know that they're taking away 5% of that. So we're going to multiply by 95% of their original salary, and we would get $190. Then we would take that salary, and we know they get a 10% increase. We multiply by 110%, which is 1.10, which would give us 209. You'll notice the difference in the time it takes to do these two methods. The first one takes a little bit longer than the second one. Next question. This is the dreaded fraction question. What number is exactly halfway between 1/4 and 1/2? I'll give you about 20 seconds to do this problem. It should be a pretty quick problem. Okay, this is a comparison problem. And to compare these fractions, we have to find something in common. And in this case, we want to find a common denominator. We're going to take 1/4, and we're going to want to change it into the common denominator it has with 1/2. That common denominator would be 8. So I'm going to multiply the top fraction by 2/2. And the bottom one by 4/4. Now we can compare the two fractions. They want the number that's actually between these two, so your answer would be 3/8. Alright, the next problem we're going to do that involves pre-algebra, it actually is a simple equation, but it's got fractions in it. I'll give you about 30 seconds to work it out. Now, if you go back to your Algebra 1, you should realize that you never have to work an equation that has fractions in it. If you rewrite it, and I change the mixed number into an improper fraction, I can look through my problem and there's a shortcut. We can get rid of all these fractions by multiplying by the common denominator. The common denominator in this problem would be 10. So if I go ahead and I multiply every one of these parts by 10, I'll get rid of the fractions. Multiplying the first one, I get 40/5, which is 8. The second one's going to give me -30/10, which is a -3. 10 times x is going to give me 10x. And then the last one is going to give me 30/2, which is 15. Now it looks like an equation we've all done before. We're going to subtract and get 5. I want to isolate my variable on one side, so I need to get rid of that 15. To get rid of the 15, I'm going to subtract 15 from both sides. That gives me -10 equals 10x. If I divide by 10, I come out with x is equal to -1. Also remember, with an equation problem, if you can't get the answer to work out, you can always plug each answer back in. But that takes quite a bit of time, because you've got to, unless you get lucky, you might have to go through 4 or 5 before you get the right one to work out. The next question is sort of a statistical problem where they give me averages. Okay, with this problem, I'll give you about 30 seconds to work it out. Okay, we've got a total of 50 students who are taking a math test. The 35 juniors had an average score of 80, and the 15 seniors had an average of 70. What we want to do is, since we want to know the average for all 50, we're going to have to get their total points for each one of these groups and then divide it by the total number of students to get the overall average. So I'm going to take the 35 juniors and I'm going to multiply by 80. That's going to give me 2,800 for their total amount of points. I'm going to take the 15 seniors and I'm going to multiply by 70. That'll give me 1,050 points for the seniors. Well, if I add those two together, it's going to give me a total of 3,850 points. So I've got 50 students who've taken the test, and I want to know what their average is. So I'm going to take 50 times the average is equal to 3,850. Divide by 50, and you're going to come out with x equals 77. Okay, that's all the problems we're going to go over today, but we will be going over problems in the future. We have other sections to go over, like the intermediate algebra, the elementary algebra, geometry, and trigonometry. Some of the things I want to tell you to finalize this is you need to be prepared for this exam. You need to go back and study, because it's been a long time since you've seen some of these concepts. They might seem easy, but if you don't go back and you study with them, when you get on the test, you might not have the time to work them out, or can't remember the shortcuts like multiplying through by the common denominator on that equation to work the problems quickly. The other thing I want to mention is you do need to bring some things to the test when you take the math test. You want to watch, okay? Time is important. 60 minutes for 60 questions. You want to leave a few things at the end, a few minutes at the end, so that you can go back, try to make some guesses, or maybe clean up some mistakes. The other thing is your calculator. You are allowed a calculator on the math portion. Do you need it? Probably not. Most of these problems can be worked out without a calculator. One of the big mistakes that are made on this test is people will bring a calculator, especially a high-powered graphing calculator, thinking it'll save the world. It'll do everything for them. Well, if it's not your calculator and you haven't practiced with it, you're going to spend most of your time just trying to figure out how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide, find the square key or the square root key. You need to have a calculator that you're familiar with. All you really need is a basic calculator. So don't go and borrow some high-powered calculator that you don't know anything about. Okay? One of the last things you need to do is actually go out and get a study guide. There are a lot of good study guides out on the market. There are some that even come with a CD that you can practice at home, and they'll score you, and they'll actually show you your mistakes and how to work through them. Yes, it's an investment. They can cost $30, $40, $50. But if you look at what the statistics show, is if you actually take the study guide home and use it, not slide it under your bed and tell your mom you're using it, but actually take it out and work problems and work the practice tests that they give you, you can improve your score 2 to 3 points at least over what you would have done without the practice book. So you need to prepare for this test. It is probably one of the most important tests you'll take in your life.